Welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. This Bigfoot sighting took place in the Black Hills, near my home in South Dakota. The park actually consists of over 1 million acres. It is incredible in its vastness and diversity. There are many trails in the park, 32 to be exact, and this trail is labeled the number 26. My sister Louise and I have been on all of them more than once, and some of them dozens of times. So we have a pretty good feel for the park. This particular trail is one of our favorites for doing a little snowshoeing or cross-country skiing in the winter months. It was the beginning of August when the sighting occurred. When hiking this trail, there's not a lot of elevation change, which is why it's ideal for snowshoeing. Perhaps there's maybe 500 to 700 feet total throughout your hike. The majority of the trail is marked in primarily old, well-worn vehicle trails throughout. There are, however, areas marked as trail where you're confronted with nothing but 4-foot tall grass. It's not much of a trail, if you ask me. While walking along these trails, you are, for the most part, walking in between rolling hills that are fairly well covered with small to medium-sized pines and some dry, rocky terrain. Many of the trails run down into what I would call small grassy meadows or fields. Luis and I were coming down this one old car path with somewhat of a tunnel effect. We were flanked on both sides by 100-foot tall hills and pine trees, with our view ahead of us being a fairly dense grouping of pines and some tall grass. We were maybe a quarter of a mile away from the grassy area that I just described, and the view to both sides was obscured by the hills. It was from that left side of this grassy field that a huge Bigfoot came walking out into the field of tall grass, moving straight across our field of vision, until it was concealed once again by the hill on our right side. As soon as we had seen it, the two of us froze in our tracks as we watched it walk across the field. This grass, by the way, was in fact the 4-foot tall grass which I spoke of earlier. As the creature was walking through it, the grass was basically level with its upper thigh area. The creature was maybe 500 yards in front of us when we saw it walking, and seemed to be completely unaware of our presence up the trail. After it had gone by, we waited for maybe 10 minutes and slowly proceeded to where we had seen it. When we made it over to the field, we were pretty frightened to be standing where this thing had just been. It was then that Louise pointed her finger in the distance and said, "Look, there it goes up on that hillside." She was pointing towards a somewhat barren slope, maybe 1,500 yards away, where we could see its dark body lumbering along. As we stood on the road, which parted the middle of the tall grass, we could see that it had come down one hill to our left and moved straight away across the field to our north. The tall grass was parted where it had traveled. The two of us stood there dumbfounded by what we had just seen. There are quite a few streams and water sources in the park, and many different small animals can be seen scurrying around as you hike the trails. But when you see something of this size, you can't help thinking, what is it doing out here and where is it going? It was a total shock to our senses. When it was cutting through the grass, its body must have been fully at least another 5 to 6 feet above the grass. More than likely it was 9 or 10 feet tall. The movement seemed to be slow and very lethargic, and yet, now that we were standing where it had been, it had walked about 100 yards, maybe 15 or 20 seconds time, which told us that it takes some serious long steps to do so. In the bright sunlight, its fur was most definitely an auburn color, because the red highlights were reflecting brightly in the sunlight. The fur was glistening, and it actually appeared very clean and almost groomed. From the view we had, which was the side of the Bigfoot, its head is somewhat below its shoulders and leaning slightly forward. Its upper shoulder muscles were behind the base of its head. As we watched it walk, the arms swung in a very slow and deliberate pendulum-like movement that appeared almost synchronized with each step. This made the animal look almost mechanical or robotic in nature. I guess that we were more shocked than frightened when we saw it, having spent so many days and hours in this wilderness through the years. Most of our friends couldn't believe it as the word began to spread about what we had experienced that day in 2006. But now that we know they're here, it's eyes wide open with every time we enter the forest from here on out. Thanks for listening. If you've had an encounter with a Bigfoot or any other cryptid, please send an email with your detailed encounter to cryptidmysterious@gmail.com. I would love to feature your story here on the channel. You may remain anonymous. We may keep the location anonymous as well. It's 100% up to you. Thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode. I'll see y'all in the next one.